Well, here I've got an interesting commission. Here I've got a Voigtlander Bessamatic, two Bessamatic M cameras and two Kodak Retina Reflex S cameras. And what the owner would like me to do is to service one Retina Reflex camera and get it and combine the best parts to have one really nice camera, and service one of the 50mm f2.8 Xenar lenses to go with the body, of course. And for the Voigtlanders, he would like one of the Bessamatic M cameras here serviced and returned with all the best parts on it, presumably. The other one is to be used as a part source. He would also like me to change the focusing screen so that instead of the plain ground glass, it had the split image from the Bessamatic over on the left there. There are two Voigtlander lenses here. One is a Colour Scope RX and the other one is a Lanthar. He would like the Colour Scope RX serviced. So I've got to work my way through this, or among other things, I'm to alter the lens mount on the Bessamatic so that it will accept Kodak lenses. I'll probably also alter the lens mount on the Kodak Retina Reflex S that he's to get back to make sure that that can also accept Voigtlander lenses, so that he can move from one body to the next regardless and use either type of lens. So it should be a fairly interesting task. The Retina Reflex cameras, one of them, the prettier of the two, that sort of works, that doesn't really work at all, that does nothing for me. And the one that's a little bit less pretty, the problem with that was that it does function, but the film advance lever doesn't want to return to the park position. It's exceptionally gummy, and I don't know what's wrong with that. I suspect that it's either packed with dried out grease or there's a problem with the film advance shaft. Doubtless I'll find out once I get into it. But otherwise, it looks like I've got my work cut out for me. So this will keep me entertained for some days to come, I would think. Alright, let's have a quick look at the state of the Reflex S bodies and lenses. I've got two bodies here, one to go home, one to be used for parts. Quick look over these, see what they're like. Apart from a bit of scuffed paint on the back, this one looks fairly good. Could certainly do with a clean, but probably could do with a service. Let's see if it does anything for us. Shuttercocks, film advance, doesn't return to the park position under its own steam. Set the shutter speed to something, 15th is good. Shouldn't be too slow. That worked pretty good. It's a bit slow, it's not, but it's definitely working. That's quite useful. I'll have a look so I can see through the finder. Quick look out the window tells me that the finder is completely covered in little black spots, speckles. I know from experience there'll be mildew, and those specks will be on the ground between the ground glass screen and the plastic screen below that carries the split image prism. So that looks straightforward. Basically it's a camera that does work, certainly needs a service. The back door is not especially pretty, not especially ugly either for that matter, but that would be a sound basis of a camera to service for use. its mate. This is the pretty one. Paint is almost all there. It's nice and neat. Film advance swings easily, returns to the park position. Meter is lively, but nothing. It looks like the shutter's cocking, judging by that tab that moves down to open the aperture on your lenses. Oh, now it's not. That was a very nasty feel. Something is broken. I suspect a damaged cocking rack. We shall find out. Could just be a sticky shutter, but I'm deeply suspicious. I don't think that is moving far enough. If the shutter was cocked and it just needed some help to return, sometimes you can encourage it. Try that. This tab here, let's see if it wants to return. No, there's absolutely no action there. I'm not pressing hard on that. So this one's a mystery. It's got problems, possibly serious problems. It's certainly the prettier of the two cameras. The state of the prism, the state of the screen, completely unknown because we can't see into it. So much for our camera bodies. I'll turn my attention to these two Zenar lenses. This lens here, this is the lens that would have come with one of the Retina Reflex bodies originally. You can see it's got a smooth edge on the front here, tab for focus. This is a later lens. Quite possibly this began its life on a Reflex 3 or even, 3 I would think. Probably a Reflex 3. It's got a knurled edge on the lens. And it's also got the focus tab too, of course. Just checking to see if the focus range is the same on these. Yes, they both focus to 0.9. And what are these lenses like for condition? Just checking that the levers move smoothly. This one, that lever does not want to move at all. That's the one that would close down our depth of field pointers. Oh, it sort of moves after a fashion. It's exceptionally unhappy about moving. That lens has got problems. Probably not insolvable, but certainly present. This one, by comparison, works smooth and well. It certainly needs to be serviced. Everything is stiffer in action than it should be, but otherwise it looks good. This particular lens is the style that would have been with the Reflex S body originally, and this is what I will concentrate on, making sure that this is the good lens that goes back with the body. Now the Bessamatics. We have a Bessamatic M. Something odd about this, the advance lever is sticking up in the air. It's not down on the body for some reason. Something strange has happened there. Whether something's been replaced with a component from another model and that's caused it to sit in a different position, or whether there's a washer under there that's been put in the wrong place, I don't know. But certainly someone's been at that. That's not how it's supposed to look. Just checking the state of this. Being a manual camera, no meter, you don't set the aperture by turning the knob on the meter. You turn it directly on the camera body here on the mount. Now that's click stopped, and that's very nice. It's independent to the shutter speed dial, so they do not counter rotate. You set the two individually. I think that's probably a choice that would suit a lot of people. On this camera, what can I notice about it? Does it cock? It does. That cocking action had a bit of a funny feel to it, but it does cock. The screen is a bit speckly. Nothing untoward, I think. I've been asked to put the screen from the Bessamatic into this, and that's something that I will investigate the possibilities of. Yeah, that film advance lever is just odd. That's just not sitting correctly at all. That's going to be one of life's mysteries that I'll doubtless find out more about. Here, on the rewind knob, the edge excuse me, the edge of that rewind knob is a bit scarred up, and I'll definitely choose to use this rewind knob when I service the camera. The advance knob on the camera I'm to re-service and repair is in better condition, so that's not a problem. I've just got to deal with that mystery of the lever sitting too high. Very interesting, that problem. It may well be that the advance shaft is incorrect for that model. It might be the advance shaft had perhaps an earlier Bessamatic or something which was differed in some fashion. That's something for me to discover. Otherwise, it's all looking good. So let's have a look at my parts camera and see what this body's like, see what state it's in. Does it cock? It does cock, and the shutter certainly fires. The dials move smoothly, no problem there. Screen is speckled, mildew spots I would imagine. That'll clean away very easily on this camera. Anything else of great note? Well, this camera, this is the reason this is a parts camera, is it's been dropped, and it has a terrible mark here on the back of the body. The edge of that door has just been thumped in completely. That would be quite an interesting panel beating job to knock that out. It might be worth a go. This is a parts camera, of course, so I may well service that one and see how it runs myself. But of course I'd need to deal with the door. It may be that I've got a better door from an earlier Bessamatic that I can use. Or at the very least I'd need to strip the leatherette off the back of that, panel beat that door out straight and put the leatherette back. I would imagine that it would be possible to clean that problem up pretty much completely. Otherwise it looks like a going camera, and certainly one that could use a service, but I don't see any serious problems with it apart from that unfortunate thump on the back. And that only leaves us with the standard lens to deal with. The colour scope are. What sort of a state's that in? No, in this case the actions work quite well. The shutter is the focus rather is probably a little bit stiffer than I would like it to be. It's still relatively smooth. I wouldn't be expecting to find any great problems with that lens. That should be a fairly straightforward service job too. So, what's going back? Well, a Bessamatic M and a Reflex S. possibly that body with the back from the other body. I think that might make a good choice. I've just got to make sure I send back the best of those two cameras. And my next task is to get into it. There's a little bit of confusion here about which of these Retina Reflex bodies I am to service and return. And so while I'm waiting for a reply, I'm simply going to start on one of them and service it completely. The prettier of the two, not the one that works the best. And hopefully that's the one that's wanted. But if it's not, I'm not overly concerned, because I will simply find a new home for that particular camera and service the other one instead. So what have we got here? Leatherette's a bit damaged at the corner. It's obviously come a bit adrift and folded back. That'll probably look fine once it's glued back down. We'll start at the top of the camera, and I'll start by removing the rewind knob, and I'll just put something through the forks to stop the shaft from turning, spin the knob, off comes the knob, and the collar can go in there for cleaning. This screw is loose, I notice. Suggests someone's been in here. This is the camera that doesn't cock. Anything's a possibility. Lift off the top cover, pop that to one side. Now I need somewhere to put these springs. There's a return spring for the meter setting button. Take off our shutter release button. Let's take this strap lug off because everything is coming off. Interesting here, the chrome is flaking off there. That's pretty unusual to see chrome do that. Suggests that something wasn't prepared properly before electroplating. I don't see any sign that that's extending to the outside edge where you'd see it, so that's not something I'd be greatly concerned about, just unusual. Let's cock the shutter slightly. Now there's almost no resistance when I move that film advance lever, which suggests that it's either not connecting to the shutter itself, or alternatively the shutter is cocked and failing to release. And that's certainly a good possibility. So we shall find out. Now the finder assembly I'm going to remove in a single piece. Wrap carefully in a paper serviette and put to one side. Finders are pretty delicate. The bottom surface and the prism are both delicate. So at the top of the camera, that's the bulk of things off that I need there. Let's get that rewind off. I'm going to be removing the meter entire. So a screw that's done up tight. That's a new thing for this camera. Oh no, I'll just lift that off. and then remove the coupling cord, put that meter aside. Let's remove the shutter release and its spring, the film release button and its spring. I can look in here now and see if I can see anything in the action as I swing the film advance. It appears to cock the shutter, but the shutter obviously doesn't release. There's a dull click, but that's all. Nothing happens. Alright. With luck, it just means that the shutter needs to be serviced. Which of course is not an uncommon thing to find with old cameras. I suppose this camera was made 60 years ago now. I suspect somebody's had a poke around and had a look inside the top, but that doesn't mean that they serviced it or repaired it in any fashion. It just means that someone's had a poke around inside the top. Looking at the cocking rack, it looks to be intact. All that grease is very nasty and dried out and sticky looking. Just about what you'd expect for a camera that's either never been serviced or hasn't been serviced in a few decades. I'll just separate these parts and they will go into the degreaser. And what I use to degrease parts like this is just a product from the hardware shop, and it's designed for painters for removing wax and grease. In fact, it's called wax and grease remover. I don't think it's anything complicated. So take that spring off and put it to one side. Take this screw out of the top of the release lever. The release lever here unlocks the film advance to allow you to wind onto the next shot. Remove that little circlip or E-clip or C-clip and its return spring. That's for the lock lever. The lock lever's job is to lock the film advance when the film counter reaches number 1. Take that chrome trim off. I may hunt out a replacement for that one if I decide that the area of chrome loss suggests that there could be a more widespread problem on that part. That is the top of the camera pretty much done. The bottom of the camera, you need the leatherette patch off the bottom of the advance lever. If I can get under that with a scalpel. That looks like it's never been disturbed. Suggests that the camera has never been serviced. It has to be said that Retina reflexes are a little bit unloved, so there are plenty of them about to use for parts cameras if you have a camera you need to service. They're usually relatively cheap, particularly if you're buying a body only. The lenses hold probably most value to people with a digital SLR who want to use them on an adapter on their camera so they can get the authentic classic lens look, or so they believe. Leatherette is stuck down well enough, moderately well. It's not exactly falling off. By the same token, it's not fighting either. So if every camera came like this, life would be much easier. Leatherettes can be quite fragile sometimes. If I suppose the plasticizers in them have dried out over time or baked out over time, the leatherettes can be very dry and hard and crispy and prone to coming to pieces. That was quite a good example. Didn't have to fight with it, didn't have to flex it too much. There were no cracks in it. It will very probably look just like new once it's back on the camera. A little bit of light verdigris on those screws. Those screws are all nickel plated brass. There's our bottom chrome trim. That looks in quite good order because there's a bit of glue and rubbish on it from the leatherette, but nothing dramatic. You can lift out the release lever, and I'm removing the spring from the release lever because it's prone to getting damaged in the cleaning process otherwise. It's a little bit out of shape, not much, entirely normal. There's our lock lever out. While I'm here, we'll have a look at the tripod socket. The tripod socket, in this case, the screws are tight. That's relatively uncommon. It's much more common for those screws to be loose. Excuse me while I lose everything. And that little aluminium piece there, I don't bother putting that through the ultrasonic cleaner, it's not required. It's usually not a problem at all. This little piece of felt just fell out. Now that is a dust trap that runs past this cord at the top. Doesn't, if it's not present, it's not the end of the world. Some cameras didn't have them. I've got to take this knob off the rewind button. I'll just unscrew that. Washer, the button and the spring I'll put to one side. The screw here drives the sprocket on the sprocket shaft. Have that out. All the stuff's a bit sticky with old grease. Take the sprocket shaft out, take the sprocket out. The sprocket I don't put through the cleaner. Usually clean that manually and it doesn't require much. There's a lot of dried grease on here. Here we have the clutch assembly comes apart. That's fine, just a bit sticky with old grease. At the bottom of the camera again, I want to unhook that spring from the catch that holds the rewind button in place in the set position until the film advance lever is moved, which automatically unlocks that. Now 3 screws here, if I can get to the right position. 3 screws here hold the advanced shaft assembly into the body. It's not uncommon for those to be loose. They're not loose in this case. Yeah, those screws loose. This doesn't want to lift out of the body. I'm just making sure I've got my screws completely undone. It could just be glued in with the grease. Yes, that's the case. It's just glued in with the grease. Okay, pop that to one side. Now this film advance shaft here, this assembly, is absolutely gummed up with dried out, thick brown dried out grease. Now I can open the bottom of the camera, lift out the film spool that's covered in film chips. Film chips with a little bit of film between the sprockets, that when clumsy people use the camera they tear them out, and you can see that they are very good at collecting in the bottom of the body there, and if they find their way into places like the shutter they can actually jam a camera and cause it to completely fail. I'll just restart the video again. Well, I'm just going to stop and start the video because I'm scared my file size limit will be hit and we'll go nowhere.